Self-trust is the quietest form of power. It doesn't shout, it doesn't need witnesses. It's the steady confidence that your own word is enough. No audience, no permission, no reminders. When you can trust yourself, discipline stops feeling restrictive. You do what you said you would, not to prove anything, but because it's the natural rhythm of who you've become. Self-trust is the system behind that rhythm. It shows that confidence is built from evidence, not emotion. That every small promise kept is a vote of reliability cast into your own future. The goal isn't perfection, it's credibility. Because when you stop negotiating with yourself, focus, peace, and confidence arrive automatically. Every relationship functions on trust, and the first one you ever formed was with yourself. It's the most important agreement you'll ever maintain, yet it's the one people keep breaking quietly. Most anxiety, procrastination, and low confidence trace back to a breach in that internal contract. You said you'd do something and didn't. You promised yourself a standard, but then made an exception. Each small breach costs credibility, and credibility is the currency that pays for calm. When you trust someone, you relax around them. The same with yourself. You stop second-guessing because you know action will meet intention. Without that confidence, your own mind becomes an unpredictable partner. One part of you commits, another cancels. You begin to doubt not only your planning, but your potential. It's not failure that damages confidence, it's inconsistency. Failure at least proves you tried. Inconsistency proves you can't rely on yourself to start. Confidence, the genuine kind, isn't an emotion that appears after success. It's evidence of reliability recorded by the subconscious. Each time you keep a promise to yourself, even the smallest one, the body files proof. I follow through. After enough repetitions, you stop needing pep talks. You don't reason yourself into confidence, you recall it. This is why tangible habits, getting up when planned, finishing a task, showing restraint, build deeper certainty than affirmations ever could. Imagine a friend who constantly promises to meet you and rarely shows. After a while, even when they do show up, you half expect them to vanish next time. The same erosion happens internally. You tell yourself, I'll start tomorrow, and the body remembers the old pattern. Tomorrow has never meant today. So it withholds energy. It waits to see if you are serious. That's what hesitation feels like. Not lack of motivation, but lack of trust inside your own system. Rebuilding begins with small, undeniable transactions. You don't restore credibility through speeches, you repay it through delivery. Keep promises simple enough that you cannot lie about completion. Drink the water. Send the message. Write the line. Every kept micro-promise deposits credibility back into your account. A single act of proof outweighs days of self-criticism. The subconscious deals only in evidence, and evidence requires completion, not intention. Think of this as financial behavior for psychology. Each commitment adds or subtracts from your balance of trust. A repeated lie to yourself is emotional debt. It accrues interest in the form of doubt. The mind becomes cautious to invest effort in future goals because history shows poor return. Restoring solvency in self-trust means paying small installments consistently until your record shows stability again. At that point, willpower costs less because internal lenders believe you. The power of credibility is mechanical. When action equals intention, the brain relaxes its monitoring systems. There's no longer a civil war between what you know you should do and what you will actually do. That alignment saves enormous energy. It's why disciplined people appear less frantic. There's no negotiation tax draining them. Their second mind runs certified code. Command equals execute. Begin your reconstruction with one promise small enough to fulfill daily without fail. Not a giant transformation, just one instruction practiced faithfully for 7 days. Take a short walk. Read one paragraph. Plan tomorrow before bed. Your aim isn't output, it's agreement. After a week, note what happens. Hesitation shrinks. The conscious mind no longer argues. It issues commands calmly because prior proof backs it. This proof is what confidence feels like at its root, a psychological receipt of performance. That's why people who train regularly or meditate consistently radiate quiet certainty. They have decades of evidence stored in their nervous system. Their calm isn't mysterious self-belief, it's data accumulated through repetition. Of course, the currency devalues through overpromising. Set too many commitments and you guarantee default. The ego loves big pledges because they relieve guilt temporarily. I'm going to change everything. But the subconscious cares only for delivery. It prefers one completed action over 1,000 declarations. Resist the temptation to purchase self-esteem on credit. Make small payments daily instead. Transparency reinforces credibility. Keep a visible ledger of what you said you'd do and whether you did it. Not for shame, just for tracking truth. The simple act of recording intentions keeps you honest and deters exaggeration. Over time, that record becomes a confidence statement, line after line of evidence that your word carries weight. Credibility also determines composure. Unreliable people react loudly because they hope force will mask inconsistency. Reliable minds act softly. They have nothing to prove. Each fulfilled promise removes the need for defense. Integrity is silent efficiency. If you were to summarize the mechanics of self-trust, it would sound like this. 1. Decide smaller. 2. Deliver completely. 3. Repeat until relief replaces doubt. At that stage, promises lose emotional weight. They become routine instructions carried out automatically. The second mind loves automation. Once a pattern of follow-through installs, it maintains itself. You're not chasing inspiration, you're establishing reliability. That's the true currency of credibility. Trust so practiced that belief is irrelevant. When you reach that point, you stop asking, "Can I?" and replace it with, "Will I keep my word?" And because history answers yes, the body moves before hesitation forms. That is the beginning of self-confidence that doesn't fluctuate with circumstance. Proof over pep talks, credibility over hype. From here, the work expands outward, understanding why promises fail, how to write them better, and how to protect the environment that keeps them safe. But before progressing, remember this simple baseline. You don't build belief first and then act. You act first, and belief follows the record. Trust is evidence, and evidence starts small. Chapter 2. Why promises break. Most people don't break promises to themselves because they lack character. They break them because they don't understand the mechanics of commitment. They treat a promise as a statement of intent, when in reality it's a relationship contract between two versions of the same person, the one making the plan and the one who has to execute it later under different conditions. The person who makes promises usually does it from a clean emotional state. They feel hopeful, they feel motivated. They are imagining the best version of the day, not the real one. They make plans at night when the body is calm, or after watching something inspiring, or during a brief window of clarity. In that moment, the future feels generous. Time looks available. Energy seems stable. The promise feels easy. Then the day arrives, and the executor shows up. That version of you is not sitting in a calm room with optimism. That version is carrying fatigue, stress, distraction, and the weight of multiple unfinished thoughts. Their brain is managing heat, hunger, social pressure, and minor irritations that don't exist when you're planning. The executor isn't a worse person, they're simply a more realistic one. And when a promise wasn't designed for real conditions, it breaks. One reason promises break is that most are not precise. They are vague commitments that feel meaningful but are impossible to measure. I'll be more disciplined. I'll start waking up earlier. I'll stop wasting time. These are not promises, they are wishes. A promise must be concrete enough that the subconscious recognizes completion. If you can't clearly tell whether you kept it, your mind can't record a win. And if it can't record a win, it can't build trust. Vague promises create vague results, and vague results create doubt. Another reason is emotional forecasting. Your mind assumes that your future emotions will match your current ones. This is almost always wrong. You plan while calm and expect yourself to execute while calm. You plan while confident and expect yourself to execute while confident. but your emotional state changes like weather. If a promise requires a specific mood to be kept, it isn't a reliable promise. It's a fragile agreement that collapses as soon as conditions shift. This is where most people confuse motivation with capacity. Motivation is a feeling. Capacity is a system. Motivation rises and falls without asking you. Capacity is what remains when motivation disappears. If you've built no system, you are depending on a feeling to produce a result. That dependency is the core of repeated self-betrayal. Promises also break because we overestimate willpower. Willpower is not a personality trait. It's a limited resource tied to energy, stress, sleep, and environment. When you're tired, willpower shrinks. When you're emotionally drained, willpower shrinks. When you're surrounded by temptations, willpower shrinks. Planning that assumes constant willpower is planning that assumes constant sunshine. Eventually, the storm arrives and the plan fails. Then the mind interprets the failure as weakness rather than as poor design. That interpretation becomes another layer of self-distrust. Many promises break because they're too big for the nervous system to accept. The body resists sudden identity change. When you tell yourself, "From tomorrow, I'm a different person," you're asking the subconscious to abandon years of habit with no gradual bridge. The nervous system interprets that as instability. It protects the old routine because it recognizes it as safe, even if it's harmful. This is why ambitious plans collapse quickly. They trigger internal resistance. The subconscious doesn't respond to grand declarations. It responds to repeated proof. Another quiet reason promises break is the reward problem. The human brain is reward-driven. It will choose immediate relief over future benefit, unless trained otherwise. Many self-promises are future-oriented, but the cost is immediate. Effort now, comfort later. If the brain has not been conditioned to value delayed reward, it will treat your promise like a threat. That's not moral failure, it's wiring. You're competing with dopamine systems that prefer quick pleasure, scrolling, sugar, entertainment, avoidance. Without a replacement reward loop, the promise loses because the nervous system chooses what feels good now. This is why discipline is not just doing hard things. It's building reward structures that make follow-through emotionally sustainable. The promise must contain some form of immediate reinforcement, even if subtle, a check mark, a short note, a small ritual that signals completion. The brain needs proof that the effort led somewhere. Without that, it begins to question why it should invest again. Promises break when you treat them as private, invisible decisions. The mind respects what it can see. When commitments are kept only in your head, they compete with every other thought and disappear under noise. Writing them down creates weight. It makes the agreement real. It also creates friction against excuses, because now the mind can't pretend the promise never existed. The simplest self-trust tool is visibility. When it's visible, it becomes harder to negotiate away. There's also a social component, even when no one else knows. You might believe your self-promises are private, but your identity is still shaped by perceived judgment. Many people break promises not because they can't do the work, but because the work threatens their self-image. If you start improving, you might have to admit you weren't living at your standard before. That admission feels like shame. So the mind chooses comfort. It returns to the old pattern because the old pattern allows you to avoid confronting the gap between your values and your behavior. Another form of this is perfectionism. Some people break promises because they set standards that are too sharp to live inside. They plan a perfect routine, a perfect diet, a perfect schedule. Then one mistake happens, and the mind concludes the entire promise is ruined. It's all or nothing thinking. That thinking creates relapse. The promise breaks not at the moment of mistake, but at the moment the mind decides the mistake invalidates effort. A disciplined system expects error and includes repair. A fragile system treats error as collapse. You should also understand the role of identity language. If you say, "I'm the kind of person who never follows through," your subconscious will protect that identity by repeating evidence for it. It will search for moments that confirm the belief, because confirmation feels stable. This is the hidden trap of negative self-description. It isn't just pessimism, it's programming. The mind tries to stay consistent with whatever it believes it is. When you carry an identity of inconsistency, promises break because breaking them keeps the identity intact. This is why self-trust must be built through small wins that are impossible to argue with. The subconscious doesn't change from inspirational thinking, it changes from repeated demonstration. One small promise kept daily will shift identity faster than one big promise broken weekly. The scale doesn't matter, the reliability does. There's a final reason promises break that is often ignored: competing priorities disguised as laziness. Sometimes you don't follow through because you actually value comfort more than the promise you made. Not as a moral flaw, but as an unexamined preference. The mind will protect what it values. If comfort is your real priority, it will win every time. Self-trust begins when you stop lying about priorities. If the promise matters, you build a structure to support it. If it doesn't matter, you stop promising it. Honesty prevents repeated betrayal. So what does this mean practically? It means you don't repair self-trust by trying harder in the same broken system. You repair it by designing promises that survive real life. You make them smaller, clearer, measurable, and attached to a visible process. You expect emotional shifts. You account for fatigue. You build reward loops. You remove perfectionism. You create repair protocols. You write promises that your future self can keep, not promises that your present self enjoys imagining. This chapter isn't meant to make you suspicious of your own intentions. It's meant to make you accurate. If you want self-trust, you need promises that function like engineering, not like hope. Hope is not worthless, but it cannot carry structure alone. Structure is what turns hope into repeatable proof. In the next chapter, we move from diagnosis to design. You'll learn how to turn intent into a contract, simple, measurable agreements that your subconscious can recognize as real. When promises become clear and realistic, your mind stops resisting them. It starts trusting them. And that is where self-trust becomes less like motivation and more like a quiet, dependable system. Chapter 3. The Contract. A promise becomes real the moment it gains terms. Until then, it's just a feeling you had in a cleaner moment. Intent is not a contract. Intent is desire. A contract is different. A contract has specifics, boundaries, and proof. It turns hope into an agreement your future self can actually execute. Most people try to build self-trust with vague ambition. They say, "I'll be better," and then wonder why the day slips away. Their mind isn't failing them. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do: ignore unclear instructions. The subconscious doesn't respond to speeches. It responds to terms it can recognize as complete. A contract begins with definition, not a story, not a motivation, not a personality label, a definition. You must be able to answer, what exactly will happen, and what does done look like? If you can't describe completion in one sentence, you haven't made a contract. You've made a mood. Instead of, "I'll work out," the contract reads, "I will do 20 minutes of walking." Instead of, "I'll focus today," it reads, "I will work for 30 minutes with my phone in another room." Instead of, "I'll stop wasting time," it reads, "I will close social media after 10 minutes." Clear terms remove debate. The second mind stops negotiating when the instruction is narrow enough to follow. The next part is time. A promise without time is an idea that can always be postponed. Time creates friction against delay, but it also creates reality. When you attach a behavior to a specific hour, your brain begins preparing for it automatically. The goal isn't to become rigid. The goal is to stop living inside later. Time doesn't need to be perfect, and it doesn't need to be heroic. It just needs to be real. At 7:30 p.m., I will write for 20 minutes. After breakfast, I will read 5 pages. Before I open my phone, I will drink water. This is where contracts beat motivation. Motivation asks for energy. Timing asks for presence. Then comes the part most people skip: recording. The moment you record what you did, you create a history your subconscious can trust. Self-trust is not built by the promise you make. It's built by the evidence you keep. This is why a credibility ledger changes everything. It's a simple list, nothing dramatic. A notebook page, a note on your phone, a calendar tick. One line per day is enough. Promise, 20 minutes walking. Completed. Promise, 30 minutes focused work. Completed. The act of writing completed is not childish. It's neurological reinforcement. You're telling your system, this is who we are. We do what we say. Without a ledger, the mind forgets wins and remembers failures. It's biased toward threat, and failure feels like threat. Recording creates balance. It makes progress visible. It gives your second mind something it respects: proof. Now, here's the key shift. A good contract is designed to survive your worst day, not your best one. Most people write promises in the voice of their strongest self, then fail under normal fatigue. That failure isn't a moral issue, it's a design issue. So your contract must include a minimum standard, the smallest version of the promise that still counts as keeping your word. This is the idea of the minimum viable promise. If your best day promise is 1 hour of exercise, your minimum might be 10 minutes of movement. If your best day promise is 2 hours of deep work, your minimum might be 20 minutes of full focus. The minimum is not laziness, it's continuity. You're preserving the identity of follow-through. When you keep the minimum, you keep the chain unbroken. And an unbroken chain is worth more than occasional intensity. A contract also needs boundaries, what you are not doing. Many promises break because they exist alongside competing actions that sabotage them. If you want focused work, you can't promise it while leaving constant interruptions available. The contract must define a protected space. Phone stays outside the room. Notifications off. No multitasking. This is not extreme, it's respectful. If you don't protect your promise, you aren't serious about keeping it. And a contract needs a clause for reality. Life will disrupt, mood will shift, people will call, energy will drop. If your contract has no clause for disruption, then disruption becomes your excuse. So include a simple rule. If the scheduled time fails, the contract moves, not dies. If I miss my session at 7:30 p.m., I will do the minimum version before bed. This prevents collapse. It keeps identity stable. The goal is not perfection of timing. The goal is execution. This is where self-trust becomes something you can build intentionally. You stop treating your future self like a stranger you hope will cooperate. You treat them like a partner you respect. You write agreements that are fair, measurable, and protected. You stop asking, will I feel like it? And start asking, what did I agree to? There's a subtle emotional shift when you do this. A contract reduces internal drama. It removes the need to constantly decide again. Most people exhaust themselves with repeated decisions. Should I work? Should I rest? Should I start? Should I wait? Contracts eliminate that churn. They store decisions ahead of time, so your mind can stop debating and begin moving. That reduction in debate is one of the earliest signs of self-trust returning. But there's another principle here. Don't promise what you're not willing to pay for. Some people write contracts to escape guilt, not to create change. They overpromise to feel momentarily better, then underdeliver and feel worse. A true contract is honest about cost. If you can't keep it, reduce it. If you won't keep it, don't write it. This sounds strict, but it's actually compassionate. Honesty prevents betrayal. The contract should feel calm, not exciting, not intimidating, calm. If it feels extreme, it's likely ego-driven. If it feels manageable, it's likely sustainable. Sustainable is what builds credibility. Once you begin living this way, you'll notice something important. The mind becomes quieter. Not because life got easier, but because internal conflict decreased. You stop making promises you don't intend to keep. You stop trusting moods as planners. You begin acting from written terms rather than temporary inspiration. And each day you complete what you agreed to, you deposit another unit of credibility into the account. This is the real payoff. Eventually, your subconscious expects follow-through. It stops resisting effort because effort has become reliable. The body stops bracing for disappointment because you've taught it that your word has weight. That's what self-trust feels like. It's not bravado, it's relief. So keep it simple. One promise, clear terms, a time window, a record of completion. Protect it with boundaries. Save it with a minimum standard. Move it if life disrupts, but don't abandon it. Do this long enough and you'll build something many people never build. A relationship with yourself that doesn't require persuasion because it's already proven. In the next chapter, we'll focus on the internal witness, the part of you that observes behavior without theatrics, without shame, and without denial. Because contracts create structure, but the witness creates honesty. And honesty is the quiet force that keeps every contract alive. Chapter 4. The Internal Witness. Self-trust doesn't grow only from action, it also grows from honesty. Not the dramatic kind of honesty you announce to others, but the quiet honesty of seeing yourself clearly. This is the role of the internal witness, the part of you that observes what you do without exaggeration, excuses, or shame. Without that witness, you can build a plan and still drift. You'll keep breaking promises and calling it bad luck, low motivation, or a busy week. The internal witness ends that fog. It turns your life into something measurable, and measurement is where change begins. Most people live without a witness. They live inside a stream of justifications. When they follow through, they barely notice. When they fail, they explain it away or punish themselves. Both responses keep the system unstable. Ignoring wins prevents trust from building. Punishing failures makes the mind avoid accountability altogether. The witness does neither. It records. It looks at results with the calm accuracy of a scientist. This happened, this didn't. Here's what led to it. That tone protects progress because it protects the willingness to keep trying. The internal witness is not the inner critic. The critic attacks identity. You're lazy, you're weak, you always fail. That language produces shame, and shame encourages avoidance. The internal witness is specific. You planned to write for 20 minutes. You opened your phone after 4. The trigger was boredom. You didn't have a protected environment. This doesn't hurt your worth. It corrects your process. Process is fixable. Identity attacks are not. The witness keeps the problem in the category you can change. This matters because the subconscious learns from consequences. If every time you look at your behavior you feel shame, the subconscious learns. Self-reflection is painful. It will begin blocking reflection. You'll avoid journaling, avoid tracking, avoid even thinking about what you promised. Your mind will protect itself by staying vague. The witness interrupts that protection by making reflection safe. Calm accuracy is a form of safety. When reflection feels safe, you do it more often. When you do it more often, you improve faster. To build the witness, start small. At the end of each day, do a 3-line audit. 1 line for what you promised, 1 line for what you did, 1 line for why it happened. Keep it short enough that you don't negotiate with yourself. This practice trains the mind to accept reality as data. Over time, the brain begins expecting this audit and adjusting behavior earlier in the day. Awareness becomes proactive. The witness also works in the moment. Before you break a promise, there is usually a brief internal gap, a second where you know what you're about to do. People often miss that gap because they rush away from discomfort. The witness trains you to stay in that second. It quietly asks, "Is this aligned?" That single question can stop the slide, not by force, but by clarity. The subconscious is powerful, but it is not blind. It responds to attention. When you bring light into the moment, automation slows down. Slower automation is choice. Many people fear the witness because they think clarity will be harsh. They confuse truth with punishment. But truth without drama is relief. It means you no longer have to pretend. Pretending is exhausting. Carrying two stories, what you want to be and what you actually do, creates tension that leaks into everything. The witness collapses the two stories into one. That alignment itself is calming. Even when the truth is uncomfortable, it's simpler. Simplicity reduces mental load, and a lower mental load makes follow-through easier. The witness also protects you from a common trap: emotional accounting. When you fail, you might feel guilty and try to compensate with an extreme plan the next day. When you succeed, you might reward yourself by abandoning the routine. This creates instability. The witness removes the need for emotional swings. It turns daily behavior into a steady system rather than a moral drama. Success becomes, I followed the contract. Failure becomes, I missed the contract. Here's the adjustment. Neither becomes a personality verdict. A major part of building the witness is language discipline. Your internal narration should be tight. Avoid global phrases like, I never, I always, I'm just like this. These are not accurate, they're emotional exaggerations. Exaggeration produces helplessness. Replace them with precise statements. I missed today's session. I delayed by an hour. I broke the rule because I didn't plan the environment. Precision keeps you in control because it keeps the problem small enough to solve. You should also learn to separate observation from interpretation. Observation is what happened. Interpretation is what you think it means. People collapse these and suffer unnecessarily. I didn't work out today is observation. I'm hopeless and I'll never change is interpretation. The witness stays with observation and moves to action. It asks, what's the next smallest repair? That question protects the only thing that matters: continuity. The system doesn't need perfection, it needs repair. Repair is a skill. Many people don't fail because they break a promise. They fail because they don't repair quickly after breaking it. They allow a missed day to become a missed week, then label themselves inconsistent. The witness prevents that spiral. It treats repair as mandatory, not optional. If you miss the full workout, you do the minimum version. If you miss the writing session, you write one paragraph. The point is not output, it's integrity. Integrity is maintained by repair. The subconscious respects repair because it proves you still keep your word even when conditions change. The witness also helps you identify patterns of self-deception. These deceptions are subtle. I'll do it later, without a time. I deserve a break, when you haven't worked. I'm too tired, when you're actually avoiding discomfort. The witness doesn't argue, it checks evidence. It asks, is this true? Sometimes it is. Rest is real. Fatigue is real. But the witness distinguishes genuine fatigue from emotional avoidance. That distinction is everything. Many lives are shaped by avoidance disguised as logic. The witness unmasks it. To strengthen the witness, you need neutrality. A good way to train neutrality is to imagine you're observing someone else. If a friend missed one day of discipline, you wouldn't call them a failure. You would say, reset tomorrow. Give yourself the same tone. Not indulgence, not harshness, just standard. Neutrality is what allows consistent correction. When tone is neutral, you can look at yourself daily without needing defense mechanisms. Over time, the witness becomes an internal standard. You stop asking, do I feel like it? And start asking, what did I agree to? You stop negotiating identity and start following procedure. That shift builds a deep calm because it reduces internal chaos. The mind likes order. The witness is order. This is also where confidence starts changing form. Instead of being a mood, it becomes a quiet expectation. You expect yourself to follow through because you have proof. The witness maintains that proof by recording reality. It becomes your inner accountant, tracking credibility deposits and withdrawals. But unlike money, credibility can be restored quickly when you act immediately. The witness teaches you to do that. Small repairs, fast, consistently. In the next chapters, you'll learn how excuses drain credibility and how to design your environment so promises become easier to keep. But none of that works without the witness, because without the witness, you can't tell whether the system is improving. The witness is the feedback mechanism that keeps self-trust alive. It doesn't motivate you, it clarifies you. And clarity, repeated daily, becomes discipline without drama. When you live with an internal witness, you stop lying to yourself in small ways. You stop promising what you won't do. You stop pretending delay is strategy. You begin meeting yourself as you are, and that meeting becomes the foundation of becoming who you want. Self-trust begins the moment you look clearly and decide to stay honest, not loudly, not publicly, but consistently. Chapter 5. The Cost of Excuses. Excuses are rarely loud. They don't sound like defiance. They sound like reason. That's why they're so effective. Most people don't wake up and decide to betray their own standards. They simply explain themselves out of action in small, believable sentences. I'll do it later. I'm not in the right mood. I've had a long day. Tomorrow will be better. Each line feels harmless in the moment, but each line spends the same currency: credibility. An excuse is not just a moment of delay, it's a transaction. You trade future trust for present comfort, and the trade has interest. The immediate reward is relief, no discomfort, no effort, no exposure. The delayed cost is doubt. Your nervous system records what happened. It learns your word is optional, your plans are negotiable, and pressure cancels promises. That learning doesn't stay contained to one task. It spreads. One excuse becomes a habit of excusing. Soon, the mind expects exceptions as the default. This is why self-trust doesn't collapse from one failure. It collapses from repeated justification. You can miss a day and still maintain integrity if you remain honest and repair quickly. But when you miss a day and explain it away, you train a deeper program. I can always talk myself out of my commitments. That program is the opposite of discipline. It creates a life where every standard is temporary. Excuses often arrive at predictable times. They show up when effort is required and the reward is distant. They show up when you're tired, stressed, or bored. They show up when the task threatens your image of competence. If you start, you might be clumsy. If you try, you might fail. The excuse protects you from that exposure. It offers the illusion of intelligence. I'm choosing the optimal time. But the optimal time is often just the time that avoids discomfort. This is where the internal witness from the previous chapter becomes essential. The witness doesn't argue with the excuse. It observes it. It listens closely to the tone and recognizes familiar patterns. It separates real constraints from emotional avoidance. Sometimes the excuse is legitimate. Rest is needed. Recovery is wise. Priorities must shift. But most of the time, the excuse is not a constraint. It's a preference disguised as necessity. A simple way to test an excuse is to ask one quiet question. If this mattered to me, what would I do anyway? Not what would I do perfectly? Not what would I do for 2 hours? What would I do in the minimum viable way that still keeps my word? That question moves you from all or nothing thinking into integrity. It turns the excuse into a decision point instead of a conclusion. There's another test. Would I accept this excuse from someone I rely on? Imagine a person who repeatedly cancels on you with reasonable explanations. At first, you empathize. Over time, you stop believing them. Not because their explanations are always false, but because reliability is measured in outcomes, not narratives. Your subconscious measures you the same way. It listens to your reasons, but it learns from your results. This is the cost of excuses. They make you unreliable to yourself. And once that happens, motivation becomes harder to access. Not because you're lazy, but because your system has learned not to trust your plans. It stops releasing energy for goals that don't get executed. This looks like low motivation on the surface. Underneath, it's your brain protecting you from repeated disappointment. Excuses also create a second cost. They multiply mental noise. Each time you delay, you carry the task forward. It stays open in the mind. It drains attention in the background. You feel heavier, not because the task is difficult, but because the mind dislikes unfinished loops. So you get the worst outcome. You avoid the work, but you still carry its weight. That's why procrastination feels exhausting. It's unpaid debt collecting interest. To reduce excuses, you don't need more guilt. Guilt produces temporary intensity and long-term avoidance. You need a protocol. A protocol is calm. It's what you do the moment the excuse appears, before it becomes a decision. Here is a protocol you can use immediately. When you notice an excuse forming, pause for one breath and state a simple truth out loud or internally. I don't want to do this right now. That sentence is not negative, it's honest. Honesty breaks the spell. Most excuses are attempts to avoid admitting desire. Once you name the desire, comfort, relief, distraction, you can choose consciously instead of pretending you had no choice. Then follow with a second truth. But I agreed. Not dramatic, just factual. This is the contract from chapter 3 reasserting itself. The mind can debate feelings endlessly, but it struggles to debate a clear agreement. You aren't fighting yourself, you're reminding yourself. Then come to the smallest action that counts. If you promise to work out, you don't need a full workout. You might need 5 minutes of movement. If you promise to write, you might need 1 paragraph. If you promise to study, you might need 1 page. This is the repair mechanism built into a mature system. You're not lowering standards, you're preserving identity. The identity is not, I do everything perfectly. The identity is, I keep my word. This is how you train the subconscious to respect you again. Not by being flawless, but by being consistent in the face of resistance. The second mind accepts a person's standards only when it sees those standards survive discomfort. It's also useful to understand that excuses are often environmental. The mind excuses itself more easily when temptation is nearby. A phone on the desk, notifications active, an open tab with easy entertainment. These are all pre-written excuses waiting for you. The more accessible the distraction, the more convincing the excuse becomes. This is not weakness, it's normal brain behavior. So part of eliminating excuses is reducing invitation. You don't just strengthen willpower, you remove the easiest exits. There's a deeper emotional layer too. Excuses protect identity. If you don't try, you can't fail. If you don't begin, you don't have to confront your current level. This avoidance preserves ego, but it destroys confidence. Confidence is built by showing up. Ego is protected by hiding. You must choose which one you want to feed. When you reduce excuses, you'll notice an unfamiliar calm appear. It's the calm of fewer negotiations. The mind stops spinning stories. It becomes quieter because you are no longer constantly explaining yourself to yourself. You act, you record, you move on. This quiet is self-respect in practice. None of this requires harshness. Excuses aren't defeated by anger. They're defeated by clarity and routine. You don't need to hate the part of you that wants comfort. You simply need to stop letting comfort write your schedule. Comfort can exist, but it should be planned, earned, and placed after alignment, not used as a reason to abandon alignment. If you take one idea from this chapter, let it be this. Every excuse you accept trains your future self to expect more excuses. Every excuse you interrupt trains your future self to expect follow-through. You are building a pattern either way. The only question is what pattern you want running automatically. In the next chapter, we move from internal negotiation to external design. We'll look at how environment can be used as an ally, how to make follow-through easier than avoidance. Because the strongest self-trust isn't built by fighting temptation all day, it's built by creating a life where integrity is the path of least resistance. Chapter 6. Environment as Ally. Most people try to build self-trust in the hardest way possible. They rely on willpower in a world designed to drain it. They expect themselves to make good choices repeatedly inside environments that constantly invite bad ones. Then they blame character when the invitation wins. But discipline is rarely a moral issue. It's usually an environmental one. Your environment is not neutral. It is a system of cues. Every object you see, every sound you hear, every app you can open in one tap, each one is a suggestion. Suggestions become habits when repeated. Habits become identity when unchallenged. If you want to keep promises to your future self, you don't only strengthen the mind, you redesign the room. The subconscious obeys what is easiest. It chooses the path of least resistance, not because it is lazy, but because it is efficient. When a behavior is convenient, it repeats. When it is inconvenient, it fades. That principle is more powerful than motivation. It's more reliable than inspiration. It's why people who seem naturally disciplined often just live inside better designed defaults. Their environment does half the work before they even arrive. So the question becomes simple. What is the easiest behavior in your current setup? Whatever it is, that is the behavior you are training daily. If the easiest behavior is checking your phone, you are training distraction. If the easiest behavior is sitting down to work because your workspace is ready, you are training focus. The environment doesn't care what you want. It reinforces what you repeat. Start by viewing your life like an engineer. If a promise keeps breaking, assume the system is misconfigured. Find the point of friction. Find the point of temptation. Don't ask, why am I like this? Ask, what in my environment makes this the default? This shifts you out of self-judgment and into design. Design is calm. Design creates change without drama. A useful rule is to make the right action obvious and the wrong action difficult. Obvious means visible, prepared, and placed in your path. Difficult means hidden, delayed, and inconvenient. This is not extreme. It's realistic. If you're serious about a promise, you protect it the way you protect something valuable. You don't leave it exposed. If you want to read more, place the book where your hand naturally reaches at night. Put your phone charger outside the bedroom. If you want to exercise, lay out your clothes before sleeping. If you want to write, keep the document open, not buried under tabs. Each adjustment reduces the number of decisions required. Fewer decisions means less opportunity for excuses. The goal is to remove negotiation from the moment of action. There are two kinds of friction you need to manage. The first is friction that blocks good behavior. The second is friction that fails to block bad behavior. Most people have both. The gym clothes are buried in a drawer, while the phone is always within reach. The system is inverted. Correct the inversion and behavior changes with less effort than you expect. Your workspace matters more than your motivation. A cluttered desk is not just a visual problem, it is an attention problem. Every item on the surface demands a small amount of cognitive processing. Notice, categorize, ignore. Those small demands add up into fatigue. A clean surface creates a clean signal. One purpose, one direction. If self-trust is about keeping promises, your workspace should look like a place where promises are kept. Quiet, ready, uncomplicated. Digital space is environment too. Your phone is a room you live in. Your home screen is your hallway. If it is full of bright icons, notifications, and easy dopamine, then you are designing distraction at the system level. Change the layout. Remove social apps from the first screen. Turn off non-essential notifications. Use grayscale. Delete what you do not use. Reduce the number of entrances into your attention. This is not about being anti-technology. It's about being the owner of your attention, not a tenant in someone else's design. Environment also includes people. The conversations you have repeatedly condition your standards. If everyone around you normalizes excuses, you will begin speaking that language. If you spend time with people who keep promises, your nervous system adapts to that expectation. This isn't moral superiority, it's behavioral contagion. Choose your inputs carefully. Not everyone needs to leave your life, but you must become selective about where you place your most disciplined hours. Your best habits deserve your best surroundings. Time itself can be designed. The easiest way to keep a promise is to attach it to a stable anchor, not to a vague time. Instead of, "I'll do it sometime today," use, "after I drink coffee," "before I shower," "immediately after lunch." Anchors work because they remove the need to remember. They turn a behavior into a sequence. Sequences become routines. Routines become identity. This is where self-trust becomes automatic. The mind stops arguing because the routine decides for it. You don't have to negotiate whether you will write today if writing always follows the same trigger. The decision was already made when the routine was installed. That is what a mature system looks like. Choices made once and executed many times. Chapter 7. Repair and Rebuild. Self-trust is not destroyed by a broken promise. It's damaged by what you do next. Most people don't lose momentum because they miss a day. They lose momentum because they turn one miss into a story. The story becomes identity. I'm inconsistent. Once that identity settles in, the mind begins behaving to match it. That's how a small slip turns into a long relapse. The repair process is what prevents that. Repair keeps your credibility intact even when life interrupts. The first rule is simple. Do not dramatize the miss. Drama turns a mechanical problem into an emotional event. Emotional events stick. If you attach shame to the failure, your subconscious learns that accountability equals pain. Then it will avoid accountability next time. The internal witness you trained earlier must stay calm here. A missed promise is not a moral verdict. It's data. Something in the system didn't hold. Your only job is to restore the system quickly. The second rule is speed. Repair must happen fast, not perfectly. The longer you wait, the more the mind builds excuses, and the more the miss begins to feel normal. When you repair within 24 hours, you teach your subconscious a powerful law. Even if we slip, we return. That return is more important than the missed day. Recovery speed becomes your real discipline. Start repair with one sentence of honesty. No self-insults, no elaborate explanations. Just the truth. I didn't keep my promise today. Then stop talking. Don't narrate your disappointment into a bigger thing. People often try to feel better by over-explaining. Over-explaining is an excuse in a nicer suit. It protects the ego, but costs credibility. Truth stated once is enough. The witness has recorded it. Next comes the smallest repair action. This is critical. Your brain needs proof that the contract still matters. If you missed a workout, do 5 minutes of movement. If you missed writing, write 1 paragraph. If you missed studying, read 1 page. The content barely matters. The message matters. My word still has weight. You are training identity, not chasing output. A small repair protects your self-image as a person who returns. This is where many people misunderstand discipline. They think discipline means never falling. But no serious person maintains perfect execution forever. The disciplined are simply excellent at recovery. They don't let a miss become a collapse. They correct early, before patterns form. Repair is discipline in its most practical form. The third rule is adjustment. After the repair action, you briefly analyze why the promise broke. Keep it specific. Not, I'm lazy. That's useless. Ask, what changed? Was it poor timing? Was it fatigue? Was it an unprotected environment? Was the promise too large for that day's energy? The answer tells you what to modify. Good systems evolve. A contract that never changes is often a contract designed for fantasy, not life. Many promises break because they were written by the optimistic version of you and executed by the exhausted version. The solution isn't to hate exhaustion. The solution is to account for it. If you repeatedly miss workouts at night, move the session earlier or reduce it. If you miss focused work because the phone is near, add friction. If you miss journaling because it feels too long, shrink it to 3 lines. A repaired system is often smaller, clearer, and more realistic. That's not lowering standards, it's protecting integrity. Another important repair tool is the minimum standard from earlier chapters. The minimum standard exists for days when the full promise isn't possible. If you didn't define a minimum, every hard day becomes an all-or-nothing test. That's fragile. A minimum keeps you consistent when conditions aren't ideal. It preserves the chain. Your subconscious respects the chain more than the size of the link. You also need to repair emotionally, not by indulging guilt, but by restoring self-respect. Self-respect doesn't mean pretending the failure didn't happen. It means treating yourself as someone worth rebuilding. Speak to yourself the way a coach would, direct, calm, forward-moving. We missed it. We're repairing now. That tone teaches the subconscious that mistakes are manageable. It removes panic from accountability. It makes improvement feel safe. There will be moments when you break promises repeatedly. That doesn't mean you're doomed. It means your contract is too ambitious, too vague, or unsupported. When relapse repeats, the solution is simplification. Reduce the promise until it becomes impossible to fail, then rebuild from there. If you can't keep a 1-hour promise, keep a 10-minute one. If you can't keep a strict diet, keep a single meal boundary. The ego hates this because it wants dramatic change, but credibility is built with small, boring consistency. Boring consistency is what creates a life that looks impressive later. A useful practice is to track repairs, not just wins. Each time you return after a miss, record it. Missed, repaired within 24 hours. That record becomes powerful evidence. It tells your subconscious, we don't disappear when things go wrong. This creates resilience. It turns setbacks into part of the system rather than interruptions of it. Eventually, repair becomes automatic. You stop fearing mistakes because you trust your return. That trust changes everything. You can take bigger risks because you know failure won't destroy your identity. You can commit harder because you know you won't abandon yourself. That is self-trust at its highest level. Not the belief that you'll be perfect, but the certainty that you'll come back. The goal is not an unbroken life. The goal is an unbroken relationship with yourself. Promises will break sometimes, but your return does not have to. The person who can repair quickly becomes unstoppable, not because they never fall, but because falling no longer ends the journey. Chapter 8. The Future Self Contract. Most people think of their future self as a concept, a vague person in the distance who will somehow benefit from today's discipline. That distance is the reason procrastination feels easy. When consequences are far away, the mind treats them as optional. The future becomes abstract, and the present becomes the only thing that feels real. Self-trust changes when your future self becomes personal. The future self contract is a way of making tomorrow feel close enough to matter. It's the practice of treating your future self as someone you are responsible for. Not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet way you feel responsible for a friend you care about. When you build that relationship, discipline stops feeling like sacrifice and starts feeling like respect. A simple truth drives this chapter. You are constantly trading with time. Every choice is a transaction between now and later. Comfort now is often debt later. Effort now is often relief later. When you understand that each choice is a trade, you begin asking a different question. What am I purchasing with this decision? That question is the beginning of mature self-trust. The reason most people don't behave for their future self is emotional disconnection. The brain is wired to prioritize immediate reward. It doesn't naturally care about distant outcomes unless you train it. Without training, it values short-term relief over long-term well-being. That's not weakness, it's normal biology. But you can override that default with relationship. Start by giving your future self a face. Not a fantasy version, but a realistic one. Imagine yourself 1 year from today. Same life, same responsibilities, but shaped by the habits you repeat now. Think about your energy, your confidence, your health, your calm. Then imagine the opposite version. What happens if you continue breaking promises? That future isn't punishment, it's arithmetic. Habits multiply, the body remembers, life responds. This isn't meant to scare you, it's meant to create closeness. When consequences feel close, choices become easier. The brain can now feel the future instead of only thinking about it. Now, build the contract. A contract is not a dream, it's an agreement with terms. Here are the terms. Your present self must deliver small actions consistently, and your future self will deliver a better baseline of life. More peace, more freedom, less stress, more options. You're not guaranteeing perfection, you're guaranteeing direction. The first practice is the daily briefing. Each morning, before your phone, before conversation, speak one sentence to your future self. Keep it simple. Today I'm keeping one promise for you. Or, today I'm protecting your peace. This is not motivational theatre, it's alignment. It reminds you that your discipline isn't abstract, it's personal. Then choose one promise that directly benefits the future. It must be specific, measurable, and small enough to keep under real conditions. If you choose too much, you'll break it and teach the opposite lesson. Future trust grows through continuity, not intensity. The future self doesn't need you to be heroic, it needs you to be reliable. The second practice is future-weighted decision-making. When you face a choice, scrolling or reading, overeating or restraint, procrastination or progress, pause and ask, would my future self thank me for this? The goal isn't to become rigid, it's to shift the emotional weight toward long-term respect. When you ask this regularly, you begin to feel the future as a quiet witness in the room. That changes behavior without force. A critical point here is empathy. You must learn to feel empathy for the version of you that will inherit your choices. Empathy is what makes people act ethically toward others. It can also make you act ethically toward yourself. If you wouldn't sabotage a friend's future for 10 minutes of comfort, why sabotage your own? When empathy activates, self-betrayal begins to feel less like relief and more like theft. Another tool is the letter method. Once a week, write a short letter from your future self to your present self. Keep it grounded, 1 paragraph. Describe what your future self appreciates about your effort and what they need more of. This sounds simple, but it activates emotional connection. It makes the future self a voice, not a fog. The subconscious begins to treat that voice as real. Over time, it becomes a stabilizing presence that can override impulse. There's also the future cost technique. When you're about to break a promise, calculate the immediate cost, not in guilt, but in consequence. If you skip your planned work session, what does that create tomorrow? More pressure, more anxiety, less time. If you break a health promise, what does that create later? Less energy, lower confidence, more discomfort. These are not moral judgments, they are predictable outcomes. Naming them makes impulse less persuasive. The present moment often hides the true price of comfort. Bringing the price into awareness is enough to shift choice. The future self contract also helps you stop overpromising. When you truly respect the future self, you stop making exaggerated commitments that you can't deliver. Overpromising is emotional. It's the present self trying to buy relief from guilt. But the future self pays the bill through broken credibility. A person who respects their future self writes smaller promises and keeps them. This is integrity as care. One of the strongest transformations in this practice is how it changes your relationship with time. Time stops feeling like an enemy and starts feeling like a resource you can allocate. You stop treating the day as something that happens to you and start treating it as something you design. This is when self-trust becomes identity rather than effort. You become someone who thinks ahead naturally, not because you're anxious, but because you're responsible. It's important to include compassion here. Some days will be harder. The future self-contract isn't a weapon, it's a guide. If you are exhausted, you still keep your minimum standard. You still maintain the chain. The future self doesn't demand punishment, it demands continuity. Continuity is the true form of respect. It's how you stay consistent without burnout. As you practice this, you'll notice a quiet shift. You begin to feel proud in advance. Not arrogant pride, but calm certainty. You know you're doing something for a version of you that will exist no matter what. You begin acting with a sense of guardianship over your own life. That guardianship makes excuses feel weaker, because you can see who they harm. Eventually, the contract becomes automatic. Your mind begins to ask future questions without prompting. You begin to feel discomfort when you break alignment, not as shame, but as signal. That signal is healthy. It means your internal compass is working. The future self has become part of your identity. Self-trust is not only about doing hard things. It's about treating your future self with dignity. It's about refusing to leave them a mess you could have cleaned today. It's about giving them options instead of consequences. So begin with one daily briefing, one future-weighted decision, and one kept promise. Record it. Let the record grow. Over weeks, your future self will stop being a vague idea and become a relationship you live inside. And once that relationship is real, self-discipline stops feeling like self-control and starts feeling like self-care in its most mature form. Quiet responsibility. In the next chapter, you'll see how this relationship produces momentum and quiet confidence. The kind of confidence that doesn't depend on mood, because it's built from repeated proof. Chapter 9. Momentum and quiet confidence. Momentum doesn't arrive with fireworks. It enters like breath. You rarely notice it the moment it takes hold. Yet suddenly, your movements line up. The small hesitations that used to pull you apart lose their grip, and your body begins to move before your mind explains why. That's the strange part. By the time you start to feel confident, you've already been acting that way for a while. The sensation sneaks in through repetition, not revelation. Think of the first week you tried to keep a promise to yourself. Maybe it was waking early, finishing that quiet piece of work no one else would applaud, or walking away from distractions that once anchored you in mediocrity. At first, it required negotiation, a list of arguments, some self-persuasion, a few false starts. You were basically talking yourself into being reliable. Every morning brought a vote. But repetition changed the game. What began as effort became record, and record became evidence. Proof is louder than any motivational speech. When you keep showing up, nervous but present, your brain begins to accept that this is who you are now. The need for pep talks fades because your muscles have learned the script. Confidence stops being a performance. It becomes recall. You don't have to convince yourself that you can, because your senses already remember doing it. Like a pianist who stops reading notes and starts feeling the pattern, your body recognizes its own reliability. This is the essence of quiet confidence, the trust that hums beneath your skin when you no longer require ceremony to begin. It's not arrogance, which wants witnesses. It's the low-toned certainty that repeats, "I've been here before. I can do this again." Emotional control grows from that rhythm because you no longer waste energy debating every decision. The path is rehearsed. The proof stands on its own. There's a story about a young boxer. He lost 6 fights in a row before he learned that power isn't only in the punch, but in the preparation that builds belief. After every defeat, he stayed to shadowbox while the arena emptied. No audience, no coach, just repetition. Tight movements, measured breathing, quiet correction. Months later, he returned to the ring, and something had shifted. He wasn't angry or inspired. He was accurate. His punches landed because his body remembered every hour he'd stored in silence. That's how momentum sounds. Not loud, but certain. The human nervous system thrives on predictability. Each time you repeat a task, the brain trims unnecessary chatter, wiring efficiency into your actions. That's why confidence grows fastest in environments of routine. The mind stops questioning, and the act becomes automatic. The trick is not to mistake boredom for lack of progress. In truth, that lull is the birthplace of consistency. Most quit there, searching for emotional novelty. The disciplined stay, embracing the dull pulse of reliability until it glows again. Picture a craftsman sanding the same edge for hours. To the untrained observer, he seems stuck, but he knows that smoothness doesn't appear instantly. It emerges through invisible layers of correction. Each stroke adds nothing dramatic, yet removes what doesn't belong. That's what you're doing when you follow through on small commitments, erasing the interruptions between intention and action until the two connect seamlessly. When the internal friction lessens, momentum begins to collect interest. One correct action shortens the distance to the next. The mind notices the pattern of success and saves it as a template. Soon, your system produces a subtle bias toward completion, and procrastination feels discordant, a behavior that no longer fits your self-image. You start seeking the equilibrium of doing, because not doing creates noise. That's the turning point, when your discipline defends itself. You don't need external pressure to move. Motion feels easier than pause. It's the same psychological mechanism that drives athletes into early morning drills long after the championship. Structure becomes comfort. To outsiders, it appears obsessive. To them, it's alignment. This phase of self-trust doesn't erase doubt entirely. It just relocates it. Doubt becomes data, not definition. Instead of dragging you backward, it signals what still needs refinement. That's the mature form of confidence, curiosity wrapped in calm. And the voice inside that once yelled, "You can't," loses volume, not because it vanished, but because evidence speaks more fluently. In practical terms, creating momentum is about stacking undeniable proof. Keep promises so small that breaking them would embarrass your logic. Write down what you did, not just what you meant to do. Review it like a scientist, not a judge. Over time, the tally becomes undeniable, and your belief stops relying on emotion altogether. The formula is unromantic but magic in effect. Action arrow, evidence arrow, memory arrow, confidence. Real-world performers live by this loop. Elite snipers rehearse identical trigger pulls until nerve, breath, and eye converge. Professional musicians repeat scales long after mastering them. Stoic entrepreneurs follow morning checklists that would bore anyone seeking thrill. Each of them understands that the quiet accumulation of proof is the only sustainable fuel source. Motivation fluctuates. Evidence compounds. When you wake up and realize your first instinct is to act instead of argue, that's the victory signal. It means the machinery of your mind has been recalibrated to default to doing. This isn't the rush of motivation. It's something denser, weightier, a gravitational pull toward completion. You no longer chase momentum. You are momentum. Still, there's a warning folded inside this new strength. Momentum can seduce you into speed without awareness. Don't let progress turn mechanical without presence. The goal is efficient consciousness, moving with calm alertness, not autopilot. Confidence should sharpen attention, not dull it. The advanced practitioner uses momentum as support, then layers intention back into each act, a mindful repetition that keeps growth alive. Quiet confidence is sometimes mistaken for detachment. In truth, it's the opposite of apathy. It's deep engagement stripped of drama. You're fully in the motion, unburdened by the question of whether you belong there. You simply do. The silence that surrounds it isn't the absence of passion, it's the soundproofing of purpose. If you want to measure your own development, notice how you react when no one notices you. Does the work still matter? Do you still keep the promise when applause is absent? Quiet confidence answers yes without words. It's the phase where integrity has become habit, and every small act of follow-through adds another brick to the foundation of belief. Eventually, you realize that self-trust isn't something you feel first, it's something you build until feeling becomes irrelevant. You just begin. You handle what's in front of you with calm precision. You take pride not in outcomes, but in alignment. Intention, action, result, all in quiet sequence. Others might call it discipline. You know it as peace. Momentum lives at this intersection, the serenity of repetition and the strength of self-respect. Keep proof at the center. Keep voices low. Keep promises visible and small. Let the days stack without ceremony. Then one morning, you'll catch yourself in motion and recognize the soundless confidence you always chased. It was the echo of consistency, finally surrounding you, telling you the truth you earned line by line. Proof is fuel, and quiet is power. CH10. Automation of integrity. There comes a point when discipline stops feeling like work. The ritual that once demanded planning and persuasion now unfolds without fanfare, as if the body received the signal before you consciously gave it. That is the automation of integrity, the state where consistency no longer requires negotiation. You stand, move, act, and adjust in a rhythm built through 1,000 settled promises. The system isn't glamorous. It hums silently, efficient and invisible, like breath under speech. At first, you notice it in small ways. You realize you've completed your morning practice or review session before any debate could arise. You start working before the mind has time to protest. What used to feel like discipline is now identity. While others search for a cue or a mood, you're already half done. Integrity has become a reflex. This process doesn't erase creativity, it liberates it. When routine responsibility runs on its own rails, mental space clears for deeper work. Decisions carry less drag because every act of alignment affirms who you are. The clutter of justification disappears, leaving room for clarity. You've shifted from managing yourself to expressing yourself. The energy once spent convincing your mind to cooperate now fuels precision and calm power. Automation doesn't mean robotic numbness. It's not the absence of awareness, but the presence of structure sturdy enough to hold awareness steadily. Think of it as a self-driving system that still updates through reflection. Each evening, you make minor course corrections, micro recalibrations that keep the machine accurate. Nothing lofty, no guilt, just consistent data entry. Promise made, promise kept. Tomorrow's settings improve quietly. There's a story of a violin maker in Cremona who built only 2 instruments each year. Every morning, he followed the same steps. Open the shutters the same way, stir the varnish the same number of times, trace the same pattern on the wood. Visitors thought him superstitious. He'd smile and say, "When the pattern is automatic, all that's left is truth." His method wasn't about ritual for its own sake, but about clearing room for instinct. He trusted that integrity in small motions would translate into purity of tone. That's the same principle you're applying. Consistency as a launchpad for mastery. The automation of integrity is built on simplicity. One promise, one action, one record. Nothing more elaborate. The human brain loves completion loops. Every closed loop releases a small pulse of satisfaction that reinforces behavior. Most people sabotage themselves by creating promises too large to finish in one mental breath. The master of self-trust keeps actions short enough that completion is inevitable and recognition immediate. That positive closure becomes self-sustaining momentum. Psychologically, automation is the final proof that your belief system has merged with your behavior system. Values and actions share the same language now. You no longer have to translate between what I should do and what I will do. The translation friction is gone. In that clarity, emotional control emerges naturally. There's less room for impulsive detours because your days have a default route toward purpose. When frustrations arrive, and they always do, you return to pattern, not panic. A well-built system absorbs pressure. It doesn't crumble under it. One skipped step doesn't eject you from the process. You simply re-enter the loop, acknowledge, adjust, follow through. The larger energy of integrity doesn't break, it flexes. That flexibility is a mark of maturity, precision without brittleness. Quiet discipline at this stage feels oddly compassionate. You stop punishing yourself for imperfection because performance data, not emotion, dictate adjustments. You've learned through repetition that shame contributes nothing to momentum. Correction replaces condemnation. Each time you apply that principle, self-trust deepens. You become both commander and caretaker, decisive and patient, strong without hardness.
From an outside view, this phase looks peaceful but intense. The eyes are calm, the actions exact. There's a peculiar aura around someone who has internalized integrity. They radiate steadiness. People around you will sense it even when you say nothing. The outside world might call it composure, but you know it as the absence of inner argument. You've silenced that courtroom inside your head. Verdict delivered, case closed. You do what you say. Eventually, automation propagates beyond routine tasks into attitude itself. You respond to challenge with posture, not panic. The reflex is solution-seeking, not self-doubt. Because you've rehearsed congruence for so long, your baseline setting under stress is still alignment. That's what separates the reactive from the resilient. You operate as a closed circuit: input, process, output. Feedback arrives, integrity updates smoothly. Every system requires maintenance, and yours is no different. The key maintenance ritual is reflection, brief but consistent. Morning anticipation, evening reconciliation. A few written lines. What promise am I keeping today? Where did I honor yesterday's? That's it. The diagnostic that ensures automation doesn't slip into complacency. The line between consistency and stagnation is awareness. You maintain it through these short check-ins. There's a quiet triumph in realizing that you no longer chase balance. It emerges as a side effect of rhythm. The same self that once fought chaos now generates order by instinct. That is transformation achieved, not through grand events, but through the looping perfection of daily microacts. Your integrity has become invisible infrastructure, the scaffolding under every choice. When you live this way, success begins to feel inevitable, not because life owes you anything, but because your system guarantees delivery. Your results may still fluctuate, but your behavior doesn't. That stability is the hidden power of self-trust. It makes you unshakable in unstable environments. You can handle fluctuations with grace, because your reference point is internal, not circumstantial. Think of yourself as both architect and occupant of this system. You designed it through discipline. Now you live inside it with peace. Each fulfilled commitment tightens the frame of reliability. Each reflection polishes the windows of awareness. From time to time, you'll glance back at the person who began this process, hesitant, uncertain, and you'll realize that version built the one standing here. Gratitude replaces judgment. The cycle closes. Now automation doesn't mean the journey ends. It means you've earned a new beginning operating from higher efficiency. With emotional control aligned, mental toughness honed, and quiet discipline embedded, you can pursue larger missions without sacrificing steadiness. Life will still present noise, but your internal rhythm keeps you tuned. Integrity at this stage feels like music without audience, a sound you create because silence would feel wrong. Each day, you count on yourself, deliver for yourself, record for yourself. One promise, one action, one record. Repeat until the concept of self-trust dissolves into simple existence. The automation of integrity is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming predictable to your own conscience. When that predictability arrives, fear loses its leverage. You've closed the distance between intention and execution, the final system upgrade. From here, you move quietly, precisely, and freely. Proof has become your pulse, and the beat is steady.